Irene, people watching and listening to this podcast don't need telling. Their rent is too high. It keeps going up. The cost of having and renting a home is becoming harder and harder. What is the EU doing about it?
Well, actually, this is a very fair question. Two key things so far. On one hand, the European Parliament just adopted its first ever housing report, which calls for action, including legislation, to reverse this housing crisis. And on the other hand, already last year, the Commission published the first ever affordable housing plan. And to talk about all of this and much more, today we have two amazing guests. Gaby Bischoff, Vice President of the S&D Group. Welcome, Gaby.
Thank you.
And we were delighted to be joined by Commissioner Dan Jørgensen, responsible for housing and energy. Commissioner, thanks so much for coming.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Ma cos'è la sinistra?
The resolution is adopted.
So we have a short episode today and so much to cover. Commissioner, you don't have a predecessor. What's it like to be the first ever EU Commissioner for Housing?
I think it's a big responsibility. Probably it's fair to say that it would have been good to have a housing commissioner before, but since it's a question that's very often been framed as purely a national competency, there's been a lot of opposition, but not least due to Gaby and her colleagues' hard work in the S&D group in the parliament, a pressure was put on the commission, and now finally we do have a housing commissioner. For me to have that responsibility also in connection with the other part of my portfolio, energy, makes a lot of sense since the price of living, obviously, yes, the rent, the mortgage, that's high, if you can even get a home. Yeah. But the price of electricity or your heating is also high. So these things need to be tackled in a holistic way.
Also, I would like to ask Gaby now, because in our last S&D poll, actually 77% of the people said that housing is a top priority. The good news here is that, as we already mentioned, we have the first ever EU Commissioner for Housing here with us. We also have the first affordable housing plan. And also, for the first time, the European Parliament has this special committee for housing crisis. You are a member of it. And this committee has approved the first housing report. So regarding this report, I would like to ask you, what are the main socialist and democrat achievements there? What did we get there?
First of all, we worked very hard for more than a year, and we had a fantastic team as S&D Group, as rapporteurs, chairs, coordinators. It was really a team success, but it was also a challenge in the parliament to get a real commitment, for example, to push the commission as fast as possible for a legal initiative on short-term rentals. We know how this will impact on the prices. At the same time, for us, the question of the right balance of having strong tenants' rights is very important, and also address homelessness and decency of homes. The question of funding, I think, is a big success, but the main work we have to do in the MFF too. And I would like to say the question of speculation. We know how much this drives prices. We know how important it is, and to have the next steps. So I think our main success is now together, Dan and us, that we brought the EU now in a pole position in the race. And now we have to deliver as fast as possible on the points that have the most impact and where we have the most competences.
And actually, we've already delivered on one issue, which is that we used to have some state aid rules that would prevent member states from supporting affordable housing. We've now changed those rules. Our colleague Teresa Ribera in the Commission has changed those rules so that member states can indeed support better these types of housing. And then, obviously, I totally agree with Gaby that the other areas she mentions are extremely important. Short-term rental is one. I'm preparing now, together with colleagues in the Commission, a legislative proposal to help tackle some of the challenges that are related to that. Because on one hand, short-term rentals, it's a great thing. It's good that we can all travel and visit each other, especially young people, and sometimes even also, paradox is for some people, the ability to be able to rent out your house for a little while can actually mean that you can afford to live in the house. So all of that we acknowledge. But we do also have to be blunt and say that there are huge problems with short-term rentals, raising the prices of housing. Some places even outcrowding people from their homes because the investors that own the building might make more money making it into a factory, basically, or sort of a de facto hotel, just short-term rentals. And that needs to be controlled better. So we will do something about that.
Yeah, actually, talking about the short-term rentals, it's a topic that we talk a lot about in S&D social media. It's kind of a drama in cities like Lisbon, Dublin, Barcelona. And I remember we had a post that was saying it's not a neighborhood if there are no neighbors. And actually what you guys are mentioning, this non-controlled short-term rental market is pushing the neighbors away. So actually, what can we do regarding this? I ask you both.
Well, so maybe I should start. What we're working on right now is to say, first of all, it's important to realize that some places this is a problem, other places it's not a problem. Actually, some places they would like more tourism and more people come visit. But indeed, I think I've still to meet a mayor of a big city with a lot of tourism in Europe that doesn't consider it a problem now. So for those cities, we will make it possible to define certain areas as stressed housing areas. And if you then follow those criteria so that you have a stressed housing area, then we will provide a list of different actions that you can then take to tackle the problem. So it's too early to say exactly what those possibilities and tools will be, but it will be things that will make it possible for local authorities to restrict short-term rentals.
And from our side, I mean, we met very early with the Alliance of Mayors and Cities on short-term rentals because we wanted to see the real down-to-earth problems. And they explained it independent politically where they come from. They all have the same problem. And this is why we need more legal clarity so that they can act. And we don't have a one-size-fits-all approach because it's different in Amsterdam than in Berlin or in Barcelona. But we want to have more room for the mayors that they can act according to the problems they have without fearing that there are infringement or other procedures. And this is why legal clarity is here so important to create. And I think this Cities in Stress is a picture that fits very much the reality when you talk to the mayors and the other responsible people in the city.
Yeah, and running through this is this idea of the housing report. Does it complementing the previous plan of affordable housing? Is there another way that you can see it's like a synergy between the two?
Well, I do think on this area, I think the two reports complement each other. Now, when I put forward the actual proposal, of course, we will then start the negotiations and we'll see. But I will say that this is one of the challenges that so many different stakeholders in the whole ecosystem of housing has pointed to as being a problem. So, when I started talking about it, the parliament talked about it even before I got the job. Some were concerned that we would ban short-term rentals, but that's never really, at least for us, been on the table. On the other hand, it's also clear that if the cities and mayors and city councils don't get real, tangible tools, then I think a lot will be disappointed. So I count on the parliament to also stay strong on this if opposition arises.
You can be absolutely sure.
That was a leading question for me.
That we will do the utmost. And I have to say, before the last elections, when we did the last legislation on short-term rentals, it was a different situation. Still, there was a lot of opposition. And we would have liked already there to have better rules. But the debate changed also in this house because the pressure is so hard.
It's
and
everywhere.
it's also conservative mayors and it's also, from all political camps, you have the same problem and they need solutions and they need them fast. And this is why I also think that the Commission has to deliver fast, and also here in the House we have to do the utmost and keep up the pressure and the good work to make sure that people can see that we can also act fast.
Yeah.
Also, regarding this, a lot of people often say that the EU has no business here, that is not an EU competency. But actually, what would you tell them? Is it that true? Because
talking about housing in general, or
regulating short-term rentals, making legislation regarding this housing crisis in all.
So I think the
aspects.
reason for that is that a lot of housing policies are also either directly social policies or definitely very closely related to social policies. And normally we would say that social policies is primarily the competency of the member states. But I think some things have changed. First of all, I think just the magnitude of the problem. I mean, imagine if we leaned back and just said, well, no, that's not our problem. You citizens might feel it's a big problem, but we cannot touch it. That would be strange. And I think at the end of the day, I don't really think our citizens care that much who solves the problem at which level. They just expect policymakers that they vote for, that they solve the problems that they consider the biggest. And when we saw at the European Parliament election the last time just how high on the agenda housing was, I think this was a very clear signal to everybody that the European Union needs to take action. Second part of this is that the more I look at it and the more we work together on it, we also find that there are actually some of these problems that are stemming from fundamental European trends. So we don't have an internal market that really is functioning on construction, for instance. If we had that, we would have constructed more houses. Or homelessness. Well, in Denmark, where I'm from, a lot of the homeless people that are living on the street are not Danish. They're from other European countries. And, by the way, when we in the Union act, it's not only legislation and regulation, it's also learning by best practices from each other. And homelessness, one example, Finland has a model called Housing First, where they've had a lot of success in fighting homelessness by using these instruments. Now, I don't have the competency to force member states to do this because a lot of it is social policies. But that shouldn't prevent, I think, us from arguing that it would be very good if that model could indeed spread to other countries.
And I think we didn't have a holistic view on it. We dealt with homelessness in the employment committee always because we have the competences there and Housing First and did a lot in the European social funds, etc. We dealt with short-term rentals, but more from a market view in the IMCO committee. But I mean, the crisis developed so drastic that we looked at housing differently. And I never perceived our work here that we, as the Parliament or the European Union, will solve the housing crisis. I always saw our mission that we do everything in our competences to help that on the ground they can deal better with the crisis and that we can deliver here. And I think with this approach, we can achieve something. And I also had, when I talked to national politicians or regionals first, that they thought, oh my God, does Europe now want to take over? And we said, no, we want to deliver in the competences where we have, but also in exchange. Like in our special committee on housing, we had fantastic examples how you can make more sustainable buildings, how renovations can be faster, how you have how the innovation in building material is elaborating. And also to spread these good examples can be an additional way. We talked about it, that we might have to do a compendium or something, because this will be important also to show that Europe does everything it can to play its part to solve the housing crisis. But the key work has to be done on the ground where people live in the cities and regions.
And talking about other components, like, renting doesn't have to always line the pocket of someone richer than you. How excited are both of you, starting with you, Commissioner, or whoever wants to jump in, about these alternative models like cooperative, non-profits, limited profit housing? It's in the report. Are we excited?
Well, I'm from Denmark, a country where we have many of these models. It's even something that has been always an integrated part of the labor movement in Denmark. So my own political party has also been engaged with this always. And the whole idea that we as a community also have a responsibility towards each other to provide housing, but not just housing, also affordable housing, decent housing, sustainable housing, and in a model that provides citizen democracy.
Yeah,
I think is a very good one, because so right now we're very focused on solving the most immediate problem, which is to find the housing for people. But actually, we need to be even more ambitious than that, because I believe, and I'm sure you agree, Gaby, that for people to have an actual vote and a say in how they live and how the community develops is a very, very good thing.
I mean, I'm coming from a city where 80% are renters. And I myself, I live in such an, what you call an alternative housing, where we also elect representatives of the others to we can address to, we can go to if there are problems. And we saw very clearly in our work in the housing committee that if you really want to have affordable prices, you need a certain level of housing that is not just market-driven.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And it stabilizes housing markets. And we have housing markets that are out of control. And this is why we really have to see also with the work of the European Investment Bank, the platform, that we just don't say we need more buildings independent of what kind of actors and buildings, but we also need a lot to have for non-profit housing, be it cooperatives, be it publicly owned housing, and this is also a priority in the work when we look on the part of the funding. That is very important to us.
Yeah.
And also, if I can add to that, we also need to look at the buildings that we already have, because yes, more needs to be built, but we also have a lot of empty homes.
Empty homes,
Which is crazy when you think about it. So some cities have struggle to find enough homes for their citizens, but they have 20% empty homes. I mean, this is just,
That's crazy.
Crazy. So also repurposing some buildings, for instance, for students. We've seen examples of old military buildings being repurposed for students, because maybe if you are a student and you're living there to study, you don't necessarily need your own bathroom and your own kitchen and your own, you can share. And these new, and maybe not even new, but these alternative types of homes can also be a big part of the solution, I think.
And I think it's an important thing that you addressed is the young people. Because if Europe wants to give sort of a positive vibe into the future of young people, it needs to give them affordable and also decent homes. I mean, especially young people in training and education.
For sure.
Okay, we only have a very short period of time left, so let's fire one more question at the Commissioner, if that's okay.
We have one last question. The S&D Group is now calling on the Commission and EU member states to take progressive solutions, right? Will the Commission do this? And especially, we are really willing to know what are the next steps for the Commission regarding the housing crisis.
Well, I think there's definitely one area that we need to still work a lot on, and that is the whole topic of speculation. Financialization of the housing market, because that's, I think it's fair to say, Gaby, that's one of the areas where also in the Parliament there's been a lot of discussion, to say the least, maybe even conflict.
Got it into the report.
It's in the report. My plan also deals with it. It's clear that we need more analysis and we need more data to make sure that we also then apply the right tools. Again, also acknowledging that a lot of what can be done will then probably have to be done on a national level. But I personally have to say that I'm convinced that we do have a problem with speculation. I, as a policymaker, don't like to just say, I feel it because I've spoken to some mayors. I need the real data, the real analysis for us to put forward real legislation or ask member states to do real things with taxation, for instance. But it is clear that when you have a situation as we do now, where to a large extent housing is being seen as a commodity that you just basically trade and
It's
invest
also a
in.
moral problem.
It
is someone's
I mean,
home.
I don't mind people making money. It's good for the market also. It can spark building of more and renovation of more. But if that's the only thing that matters, then how do we make sure that the investments made are for the benefit of the entire society?
Exactly.
And probably we're not there, or I know for a fact we're not there yet.
Thank you to Commissioner Dan Jørgensen. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much for
Thank
coming.
you. See you next podcast.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
See you, Gaby. See you.
Ciao, ciao.
So we've lost the commissioner, but we're still here with Gaby. All the better. Gaby, how did we get here? How did we manage to get all this language in the report, and how do we even manage to have a report on a commissioner in the first place?
We have seen the crisis building up earlier than other people because we are close to the people. We talk to them. We have seen how hard it is in many, many cities to find affordable homes, how workers struggled because more and more of their income went into mortgages or rents. And this is why we took it up as a priority in our electoral campaign 2024. And we also had a plan how to deliver on it. It was not just a campaigning thing. So we pressed very much Madame von der Leyen before she was elected that we insist on a housing commissioner, the first ever.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we used the possibilities we have as a political group here to press for this special committee on housing and to make sure that this is supported by other political groups. And then I can tell you, we worked our heads off in this committee to have this report and the end and the proposals. And we will not give in now. As I said, we are now in a pole position, but we have to make something out of this pole position in this race for affordable housing. And this is why we will pressure now on the legislative proposal on short-term rentals, that we will press on the topic of speculation. We will take this up as a group and further develop it on the funding, on all the key points that we have in this report, because people don't judge reports, they judge the action.
Exactly.
And this is where we are really hardworking and continue, even that we now have the 2 housing reports, because now the time is for delivering.
Exactly. Well, actually, I think this is a very nice conclusion. The report is done. Now it's time for action. Thank you so much for joining us today.
With pleasure.
Keep the commissioner under pressure.
Yes, please.
We all do.
That's great.
Gaby, thanks so much. See you next time.
you.
Thanks for
See you
listening,
next
everyone.
time. And for all of you guys, thank you so much for listening. Please do not hesitate to leave us a comment, to let us know what do you think, share, like, follow us on every social media. And as you know, this podcast is on every platform. And see you in the next episode. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Oh
Thank
my
you
God,
so
his phone went
much,
off.
Gaby.